Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Al Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson, coming up on today's programme. Tonight, the Middle East stands on the brink of further conflict after a missile barrage from Iran targeting Israel. Israeli forces look set to retaliate. Hezbollah reports fierce clashes with Israeli troops in Lebanon, and airstrikes continue to hit key targets across the region. And as the region braces for further violence, we bring you the latest developments and their potential global impact. Welcome to the programme. Tensions in the Middle East have reached new heights as Israeli officials have pledged to respond following the barrage of ballistic missile strikes launched by Iran on Tuesday. The missiles targeted key military and security installations within Israel. Well, according to Iranian authorities, these strikes were a direct response to recent Israeli military actions in Gaza and Lebanon, as well as the killings of senior leaders from Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Well, Iran has also issued a stark warning, cautioning Israel against any form of retaliation. In southern Lebanon, meanwhile, Hezbollah has reported clashes with Israeli forces near the town of Odaise, claiming that they inflicted significant losses and forced Israeli troops to retreat. Well, as hostilities persist and amidst ongoing Israeli strikes across Lebanon, the Israeli military has ordered additional evacuations in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Now, violence continued to rage on the Israeli-Lebanese border today, and Israeli troops appear to be beefing up their presence in a bid to step up pressure on Hezbollah. Well, the Lebanese army says that Israeli soldiers made a brief incursion into the south of Lebanon earlier today, breaching the so-called Blue Line. Well, for more analysis, we're joined now by retired General Khalil Helou, who is from the Lebanese army. General, you've got decades of military experience, and we're really grateful to you sharing your expertise and understanding the security dynamics of Lebanon and the broader region. What is your interpretation of Israel's military strategy in southern Lebanon?
Well, what is unfolding since 3 days is that the Israelis in the first beginning started preparing this incursion by heavy artillery shelling and, of course, by strategic targeting of Hezbollah positions all over Lebanon. But in South Lebanon particularly, they heavily used artillery and tanks in order to prepare the incursion. We have 2 points of incursion. The first one is in the eastern part of the border that is near the finger of the Galilee, the northern part of Israel, and the second one, is a little bit southern. So in these 2 points, the Israeli incursions is not more than 500 meters. But what we can conclude is that despite this heavy shelling by the Israelis and despite the observation and scrutinizing the border, Hezbollah troops that are present in these 2 points of incursion, the second one is in Maroun al-Ras, toward Bint Jbeil. So the Hezbollah troops who are located in the tunnels underground didn't move, didn't use fire, didn't use weapons at all. So the Israeli infantry that started getting into the Lebanese territory was surprised by an ambush. And it seemed 2 ambushes. And it seems that the ambush that occurred in Adaisi, in the Miskaf Am Adaisi axis, was resulted in heavy casualties, in numerous casualties in Israel. And there are reports there, dozens of soldiers, of Israeli soldiers of the elite units have been wounded. And there is a report that there is a lieutenant in these forces that have been killed in this ambush. So now this is let's say a sample of what could happen further, because we guess that in South Lebanon, Hezbollah forces are located in the tunnels. There are tunnel shafts. Some of these tunnel shafts have been located and and they have been targeted by Israel because Hezbollah used these tunnel shafts to fire rockets on Israel. But there are other tunnel shafts that are still concealed and haven't been used. We guess this. This is the ABC of any military action by irregular forces. The effect of surprise and the knowledge and interaction with the topography of the ground. So this is what's going on. But it seems that Israeli military targets could be to occupy a very small buffer zone in South Lebanon, bordering the area, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers, exactly like they did in Gaza, and using this occupied land eventually. Till now, it didn't happen, but eventually using this land as a launching pad for special operations, infantry and armored operations inside the Lebanese territory, limited operations, limited in time, limited geographically, and then returning back. This is exactly what is happening in Gaza. Gaza is not fully occupied. It's only the borders are occupied in a narrow territory, and they have also the Netzarim corridor where their forces, the Israeli forces, are located, and they use these locations in order to operate against Hamas every now and then for a few days or a few weeks, using troops by the size of companies or battalions or even brigades. So we guess that this is one of the options that Israel will follow in South Lebanon, or it depends on the will of fight of Hezbollah, and it depends on the resistance of Hezbollah. If Hezbollah resists, I think this is the best option. If Hezbollah doesn't resist, a full occupation may occur till the Litani and maybe further.
But General, Israel is saying that it's simply aiming to destroy some tunnels, some infrastructure, and it doesn't want to or intend to carry out a wider operation. I mean, it sounds like you don't think that sounds very likely.
Yeah. This is exactly what I'm saying. It's not the occupation. I don't think that the Israelis have the appetite to occupy, because this will put on them heavy burdens, diplomatic burdens, human burden, all sort of problems they had during their previous occupation between 1978 and 2000. So I think that the best option they could use is the one I described: several incursions and unlimited in time. It doesn't mean that these incursions will finish in 1 week or 2 or 3. They may last for months and maybe for years. It is just to dismantle the Hezbollah fighting forces in South Lebanon, to prevent the direct firing by anti-tank weapons, because these anti-tank weapons could not be dealt with by the Iron Dome, whereas the Katyushas that have a longer range could be dealt with by Iron Dome. So this option I am describing could guarantee the pulling out or pulling back the Hezbollah forces for 5 or maybe 10 kilometers. This is the range of these direct fires. But I don't think that this mission will be easy, because the sample we saw today in Adaisi, Miskaf Am, is important, and this is we guess this is what's going to happen if they go further. There's a price to pay for any military action in South Lebanon, and Hezbollah, despite the losses they suffered by the killing of their leadership, the mid-ranked leadership or the senior leadership, or by degrading their forces by the bombardment, despite all this, it seems that the fighting capacity of Hezbollah is still working. And it seems that the chain of command with the central command has been recovered, despite the killing of the Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General. So this is the situation. And as a forecast, I expect that it will last for long weeks, unless there is a breakthrough on the diplomatic at the diplomatic level. But for the moment, it is unlikely.
Of course, yesterday Iran carried out a major assault on Israel. Israel and the United States promising to hit back, and we understand that Netanyahu is meeting some senior defense officials right now. What might we see? What are your thoughts as to what we might see by way of a response to what happened in Israeli territory yesterday?
Well, Israel has a lot of options, but all of them are bad because they will have repercussions, especially on the United States forces that are located in the Arab Gulf. One of the options could be the targeting of the petrochemical complex of Abadan, that is the lifeline of Iran, the lifeline of the incomes of Iran. Another one is the terminal port of Kharj, from where the Iranian oil is exported. This would be a very serious hit to Iran. And we saw what happened in Yemen with the Hodeidah and the oil facilities. So I think this is one of the likely options. But we have to keep in mind that if we are let's say, if Israel is cutting the incomes of Iran, Iran could retaliate aggressively in the Persian Gulf by releasing sea mines or by targeting the oil tankers, super tankers that are going to the west. And today, an Iranian analyst said that very clearly. You kill us, we kill you. So if this happens, this will be followed by involvement of the United States Navy that is there. And I remind you, in the 80s, Iran did the same. The Iranians targeted the Kuwaiti oil tankers, and the United States escorted these tankers. A mine exploded in a Navy battleship, US, and the United States retaliated on Iran with an operation named Praying Mantis, where they destroyed at least 6 Iranian vessels, ships, and where at least 50 Iranian sailors were killed. And Iran at that moment stopped any military action, and 2 weeks later there was a ceasefire with Iraq. So this is an example of recent history. But I don't see if another retaliation by Israel, another option by Israel, would be harmful for Iran. I don't think that Israel will dare to target the nuclear facilities. The nuclear facilities are very well protected. They are 20 to 80 meters underground, and they are dispersed. They are not in the same location, and Israel couldn't do it by itself. They need US help, and they need a clearance from the US. And even if they want to target Abadan and the terminal of Kharj, it needs also a green light from the US. But other targets could be more likely, like, for example, military facilities of the Iranian Revolution Guard Corps, or killing of Iranian scientists, or, for example, the power grids of Iran, and so on. All these targets are within reach by the Israeli Air Force. But the most harmful targets would be Abadan and Kharj, or the nuclear facilities. But the US green light is needed here.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. We're out of time. Retired General Khalil Helou from the Lebanese Army, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
My next guest is Jonathan Panikoff, a highly respected expert in Middle Eastern affairs. He previously served as the Deputy National Intelligence Officer for the Near East at the National Intelligence Council, where he played a pivotal role in shaping US intelligence assessments for the region. Jonathan Panikoff, thank you very much indeed for joining us. When you look at events unfolding in the region, what does it look like to you? Who's in the driving seat and who's calling the shots? Is it Israel or the United States?
Well, thanks so much for having me. Look, there's no doubt that it's Israel. The reality is, at the end of the day, the Israelis are going to do what the Israelis are going to do, and we're seeing that you're seeing that become a truism, frankly. The Israeli strike against Nasrallah was not something coordinated with the United States. The Israeli decision to move ground forces into Lebanon, it sounds like the U.S. was given a heads up, but it was certainly not something the U.S. signed off on. And we'll see what happens with the Israeli response to Iran and how the Israelis decide to execute that and how far they go. At the end of the day, right now, Israel is the power in the region that's making the decisions about how the region is going to be going forward.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at sort of the track record of US diplomacy in the region in the last year or so, and you've had these 10 visits by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to the region, trying to broker a ceasefire in Gaza, for example. We haven't had a ceasefire since last November. I mean, it looks to the rest of the world like US diplomacy, for some reason, isn't delivering the goods.
Well, look, there's certainly no doubt that U.S. diplomacy has not had the success that I think anybody would want, whether it's President Biden or anybody in the administration. I think there's two ways to look at this. One is the U.S. could step back and not try at all, and then I think we'd actually have an even worse situation. I think there are areas where U.S. has had a success in trying to pull the Israelis back from maybe how far they were going to go originally. I think the operation in Rafah a few months ago was a good example of that. But I certainly think it's true. The U.S. is not able to compel the Israelis to simply do what the U.S. wants. But in the same way, you haven't seen Qatar or Egypt be able to compel Hamas to reach a ceasefire. You're not able to see somebody compel Iran to withhold fire or Hezbollah to have stopped the rocket attacks since October 8th. I think the problem is we're used to a world in which certain powers are able to really push smaller ones around. And now more and more, especially in the region, are exerting their own agency. And that becomes sometimes a problem for areas like diplomacy, and we're seeing that play out.
Just looking at what happened in Israel and the skies above Israel last night, 180 or so missiles fired at the country by Iran. We understand the United States did help Israel. We understand the UK helped Israel as well. Just tell us a little bit about what we know with regards to the role played by the US in helping Israel in its hour of need.
Sure, absolutely. What happened last time, there is a good comparison to the situation in April compared to what happened yesterday. The difference is this time it was almost all ballistic missiles, 181 of them fired, and you had more that actually got through. So the problem becomes in April, you had a lot more time for the UK, France, other allies to undertake defensive actions to help Israel because drones, cruise missiles move slower. In this case, it's about 12 minutes from the time of launch of a ballistic missile in Iran until it reaches Israel. And so you had quite a bit more come through. You did have US defenses and UK defenses to some extent play a role and certainly a role in coordinating. But ultimately, you had more get through. Some of it fell into empty areas and some of it was taken down by Israel's advanced anti-missile defense systems, but it was actually a step up and an escalation from where we were in April.
I mean, the fact that none of those missiles inflicted any serious damage raises the question, did Iran actually intend to cause any serious damage, or was this merely a show of strength, do you think, for a domestic audience?
No, I think Iran did intend to cause damage this time. Now, I think that they were careful. I don't think there's reason to believe that they're going after civilian targets or that they were going after maybe infrastructure that would completely create a mass casualty event in Israel. But I think they did want to cause some damage, but this reflects the frank challenge that Iran has. It's painted itself a bit into the corner. It probably felt it had to respond to ensure the legitimacy and credibility that it needs from its proxies, that even with Hezbollah diminished, it doesn't want to be in a situation where it has absolutely no sway over them. But at the same time, by responding as it did, the impact at best was frankly quite minimal. And the reality is it demonstrated again that Israel's defensive and military superiority is so extensive that it's really made it so that it's not clear if Israel responds now, how will Iran respond to that? Are they just going to say, okay, that's enough, we're gonna go home as they did in April, or will they try again despite not having almost any success the last two times?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Israel does do next. And I think, they're counting, aren't they, to a certain extent on some fractures in society in Iran. At the beginning of the week, Prime Minister Netanyahu made that address to the people of Iran, explaining to them the rationale for Israel's actions. I mean, do you think, there are people that say Iran's leadership is in a somewhat fragile position. Do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu is counting on perhaps, driving a further wedge between the leadership and the people of Iran? And how might that help Israel? How might things play out?
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli leadership would certainly welcome a further wedge. I'm not sure there's much Israel is going to be able to do to actually further that. The reality is Iranian society is incredibly split right now already. You can look back to the Masa Amini protests and what happened. You can look back to how Iran has, frankly, use the besiege and its other domestic militant forces to suppress its own people. I think those splits are pretty extensive. Now, if Israel can exploit them for intelligence collection, if Israel can exploit them for aid, I think they certainly will. But I think this is as much about Israel trying to deter Iran. Now, we'll see what comes next. If Israel actually were to strike some of the nuclear sites, if it were to strike some of the oil fields, then it could lead to a different position. But the reality is, at the end of the day, that the trouble is that somebody in Iran is going to have to switch sides, somebody with guns. At the end of the day, guns trump words, and one of the reasons you didn't see greater success from the Masa Amini protests is because, frankly, the security services and the forces have all been quite devoted to the revolution.
There must be some nervousness, though, in Tehran, given that Israeli intelligence is on something of a roll. I mean, I think it's fair to say at this precise moment, intel is Israel's #1 asset. Would you agree with that?
I certainly would. I mean, look, in the last 2 months or so, Israel has eliminated more Hezbollah leaders than it did in the last 2 decades total. And then you add to that the death of Hania in Tehran itself. I think it certainly is making Iran incredibly nervous. But Iran is a learning organization. They will try to adapt. They'll try to put their counterintelligence against this. And Israel's effort and the U.S. and allied efforts, including the U.K., is going to be to try to stay 1 to 2 steps ahead of whatever changes the Iranians make.
Yeah, I mean, the fact the Ayatollah has been relocated to safe places on a number of occasions in the last couple of days suggests there must be some in Iran who think, well, if the Israelis manage to track down and neutralize, to use their words, not mine, Hassan Nasrallah, perhaps they're capable of doing the same to some of our leadership.
I think that's absolutely right. Look, the reality is this started with probably Fuad Shukur's death in Lebanon at the end of July. We're now at the beginning of October. The number of people that Israel has been able to kill associated with Hezbollah, it's not just the leadership. The pager and walkie-talkie incidents have demonstrated Israel has the ability to get to almost anywhere, one associated with Hezbollah up or down the chain. Certainly the Iranian regime is going to be fearful that Israel can do the same in Iran. And so the relocation of the supreme leader probably doesn't play very well in the press, as it leaves the citizens open to being harmed. But nevertheless, it's for his own protection, because I think the Iranians just don't know what's coming next from Israel.
Yeah, and you're sort of echoing the words of a British intelligence officer we spoke to on this channel on Saturday, shortly after the news that Hassan Nasrallah had indeed been killed the previous day by that Israeli airstrike. He said to us that looking at the financial turmoil in the region, the economy of Lebanon has been plunged into absolute chaos in the last couple of years. It means that intel is really cheap in Lebanon, and they've been able to get, access to information they wouldn't otherwise have been able to get access to, and it's certainly not at that price. That's presumably happening in Iran as well, isn't it?
I think it could be part of the story. I think the other part of the story is, frankly, technological advances, the use of artificial intelligence, the use of being able to mine big data sets. There was a report recently that Israel can quite literally now track even to a minute degree, changes above the ground in where a small shipment moved, or where a small case moved, or where individuals moved. I think you're going to start to see the same thing play out in Iran. Iran is a harder target than Lebanon. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The access and sources Israel has in Lebanon are just stronger, and it's been easier to go through. But I think some of the technology advances, in addition to the weakening economy, are also playing a role.
So, given that we agree that Israeli intelligence is on something of a roll at the moment, do you think this explains why Prime Minister Netanyahu is really seizing the momentum, and he seems so unwilling? Do you think this explains why he's unwilling to come to the table and talk about ceasefires and negotiate? Because he sees himself as being on a roll.
I think that's probably right in terms of Lebanon. I actually think there probably was a window, and it was frankly both Netanyahu who changed some terms and Yahya Sinwar who changed some terms when it comes to Gaza. I think now, however, there's a real push. The Israeli security and defense establishment was very, very split from the political establishment when it came to Gaza and how to proceed, especially given the hostages. There's a lot more unity in Israel on the issue of Hezbollah and on the issue of Iran and what needs to be done. And so now that phase has really started in earnest, I think that it's also easier for Netanyahu to push forward because he's going to have greater support from the Israeli people, from the security establishment, the political pressure that we've seen from on Netanyahu to get the tens of thousands of Israelis back to their home in the north has only been increasing over the months. And so I think the Israel sees it as an opportunity. Netanyahu doesn't see there's a particular reason to stop. And let's be honest, the last thing I'll say is that it also helps him domestically with the right wing of his political cabinet. And I'm sure he's welcoming that because it keeps him in power as well.
Indeed, and we're also in the final months of the Biden administration. And do you think that, again, is a factor in limiting U.S. options, U.S. maneuverability in the Middle East when it comes to diplomacy?
Honestly, I don't. I don't think it's going to actually, frankly, matter whether it was President Biden now or President Harris or President Trump. I think at the end of the day, Israel and Netanyahu in particular may think either President Harris or President Trump may be better for Israel, and they might have an easier time maneuvering and taking actions, and there'd be less criticism. But the truth of the matter is, I think anybody would have a tough time getting to a diplomatic solution. And what you've heard from both Vice President Harris and former President Trump is an effort to say, no, we need this war to end. I'm going to make a deal. They say it in different ways. They say it, think about it differently. But at the end, I think neither wants to walk into office on January 20th and have this crisis continuing. So I think both would be, frankly, quite happy to see U.S. diplomacy succeed. I think it's more skeptical that that's going to happen, though, given what we're seeing in the potential for escalation, not de-escalation.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're out of time. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Jonathan Panikoff, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned on Tuesday of what he called the broadening of the Middle East conflict, with what he called escalation after escalation. And he said this has to stop. Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined by the host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. I'm also joined by the Israeli journalist and social activist Emily Schrader. Emily, let me start with you, because I gather you're speaking to us from a bomb shelter. And I'd like to ask you, whose fault do you think it is that you're in a bomb shelter?
Well, I don't think it will be a surprise to anyone that I tell you that the reason I'm in a bomb shelter is because the Islamic Republic of Iran is firing rockets on Israel. I do not think that this is Israel's fault in any way, shape, or form. I think that Israel has been on the receiving end from multiple terror proxies of this regime, including Hezbollah since October 8th and Hamas since October 7th, firing indiscriminately at Israeli civilians here on the ground, and that is no different whether the place of origin is in Tehran or in Beirut or near Beirut or in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, Cenk Uygur, I'd like to ask for your thoughts on what's just been said.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she's in a bomb shelter, and the proximate cause of that is Iran's counter attack. But she left out the counter part. So if we're being honest about this situation overall, the Israelis have occupied, oppressed, humiliated, denigrated, and killed the Palestinians for the last 57 years in one of the most brutal occupations the world has ever seen. The length of it is stunning. And at any time they choose, they can go in and annihilate Gaza, as they did. And then if anybody fights back, they go, oh my God, what outrageous anti-Semites. Can you believe they do this for no reason at all, just because they hate us? Then on top of the occupation, they have now gone and attacked the foreign capitals of Lebanon, Iran, Syria. They're now attacking Yemen, and obviously they destroyed Gaza entirely. But they believe, and Emily will tell you, they believe in their hearts that they are the victims because they can't see straight. They don't realize they're not David anymore. They're Goliath, and they're destroying the entire Middle East.
Okay, Emily, I
find that highly ironic given the fact that the Islamic Republic itself is occupying all of those countries that you mentioned, which is the source of the problem. If these terror proxies, if these countries that were being colonized by the Islamic Republic did not have that problem of the Islamic Republic, we would not be in this position. And you know, you love to talk about occupation, except on October 6th, Israel wasn't attacking Gaza. It wasn't attacking the West Bank. It wasn't attacking anyone, certainly not the Islamic Republic. And yet, we still received a massacre of civilians, men, women, and children who were kidnapped and raped and murdered brutally in front of their families, children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children. We still have 101 hostages in Hamas captivity. None of that is Israel's fault. And what you're doing, Cenk, is you're blaming the victim.
Israel, the victim. Hilarious. So, look, first of all, she said Israel wasn't doing anything on October 6th. Yeah, of course you were. You were occupying the Palestinians for the 57th year in a row.
There wasn't a single Israeli in the Gaza Strip on October 6th. There wasn't a single Israeli in the Gaza Strip, except the ones that they're holding hostage. Those ones were in the Gaza Strip.
This would happen. I told the producers ahead of time, there is no Israeli supporter that doesn't talk over you. You think that you feel entitled to the airtime.
Always trying to shut down your own guy?
Your lives are more valuable.
Cenk, hot kettle black. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be a hypocrite.
Okay. One at a time. Let's listen to what Cenk has to say, and then we'll come straight back to you, Emily. That's a promise.
Now you're promising her. She's the one talking over me. I didn't talk over her at all. And this is what the Israelis are like. They're like, we have our rights. We are important. Our lives matter. The Palestinians, we slaughtered 41,000 of them. But that's okay, because their lives are worthless. So, Emily, my heart broke on October 7th. And you guys don't believe me because you think anyone who criticizes Israel must be an anti-Semite. You don't know. I have Jewish family and friends, okay? They go to Israel all the time. I don't want anybody getting hurt in Israel. I'm a massive believer in nonviolence, and I will stick to that no matter what. But when I say, oh, my God, I can't believe 1,200 Israelis died, and that's terrible, I also think that 41,000 at a bare minimum Palestinians dead, over 25,000 women and children. Imagine a stadium filled with women and children, all dead. Israel did that, and you go, no big deal. Oh, the occupation for 57 years, no big deal. We're the victims. You sound preposterous, ridiculous.
Okay, I have to let Emily respond to that. Emily, go ahead.
Well, I think it's ridiculous that Cenk really has no horse in this race. He is not Palestinian or even Arab, and he certainly isn't Jewish or Israeli and doesn't live here. So I'm not even sure why he's so impassioned about this. But it seems that any time Israel defends itself in any capacity, Cenk has a problem with it. I'd really like to know, Cenk, what do you think Israel should have done in response to October 7th? Do you think Israel should not react? And also, you're making a critical mistake that I've seen a lot of people make since October 7th, and that is equating the actions of a terrorist organization carrying out a crime against civilians with a defensive war. What Israel's obligations and what their agenda was from the beginning after October 7th was dismantling Hamas and ensuring that they're not able to commit similar attacks like that in the future. That has been the objective, and of course to bring our hostages home. That has been the objective of the IDF since day one. I am sorry that there are civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, but this is a byproduct of the use of human shields in the Gaza Strip, and of course, also endangering civilians by firing and carrying out terrorist operations, terrorist headquarters near UN facilities, near mosques, inside of schools. All of these things we have seen on a regular basis from the Gaza Strip. And in fact, Hamas leaders themselves have bragged about using human shields. This isn't something new. It isn't even something debatable. Now, you can talk about how much precaution Israel has taken or was it enough. Those are all legitimate debates. But to hear you come on this show and claim that Israel has slaughtered 41,000 Palestinians as if they're all just innocent Palestinian children sitting around, when in fact at least 18,000 of them have been confirmed to be terrorists, not to mention the fact that I don't hear you going around criticizing the recruitment of Palestinian children to terror organizations, whether it's Islamic Jihad, whether it's Hamas or other organizations. There are 14 to 17-year-olds, thousands of them, who have been recruited by these terrorist organizations. That alone is child abuse. But of course, when it comes to reporting casualties, which are coming from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which of course is run by Hamas, there's no differentiation between terrorists and civilians.
All right, Emily, let me just interrupt for 1 second. I'd like to ask Cenk, actually, one of the points you brought up there. You said, he's got no horse in the race. Why are you so impassioned? I'd actually quite like to know how you'd respond to that before you get on to the other points that Emily just made.
Yeah, I'll note that the filibustering continues. Okay, so first of all, I thank you for bringing that back up, because it's a funny word to use, but I'm amused by Emily's shock that I would care about other human beings that are not in my tribe. Like, that to her is like, I don't get it. If you're in my tribe, your life is worth everything. And if you're not in my tribe, 41,000 people, who cares? I got a talking point here.
Don't put words in my mouth.
They're not even children. Are they really children? They're not really children. They're signing up for things. Are they really innocent? They're not really innocent. Are their lives worth the same as the Israeli lives?
I said the opposite. I said the children are victims.
So here we go with the interrupting. Okay, so
don't put words in my mouth, and I won't interrupt you.
Here we go.
Okay, let Cenk finish, then we'll come back to you, Emily.
But that's the thing with Israelis. They think that they're entitled to the world. And I'm not allowed to speak. I'm not allowed to speak on behalf of Palestinians. Are you crazy? The whole world is saying, my God, Israel, what are you doing to these people? How long are you going to keep them enslaved in your open air camps and say you have no rights at all and we could slaughter you at any time? And we have. And if you kill one of us, we're going to kill 40 of you. And I bet you're super proud of that. Oh, yeah, we killed more of you. We killed more of your civilians. Well, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it as a decent human being. And I wish that people would get outside of their tribes and realize that everyone is human. But the Israelis don't view the Palestinians, the Iranians, the Lebanese as human at all. They just view them as these and I'm being authentic here. I understand their perspective. They've been victimized by the world so often before Israel that they believe that everyone's an anti-Semite and they have a right to protect themselves because they're going to get wiped out at any point. They don't realize they're a nuclear power. They're backed by the largest military in the history of the world, and they're the ones that are crushing other people. They're the ones oppressing other people. After what's happened to Jews throughout the history of the world, for them to now repeat that when they're in charge is so sad. It's so heartbreaking that any human being's heart would go out to the Palestinians, and by the way, to the Israelis for what they have become. Please stop killing all of your neighbors and occupying them. If you want to know what the correct answer was, it's super easy. And in fact, all of the Arab states, despite all of your lies, have clearly said that they are willing to give Israel safety, peace, and security if you just end the occupation. But you won't do it because you want to take more of the West Bank for your lunatic settlers, you want to take more of Gaza, and now I'm afraid you're going to go and occupy southern Lebanon, and they use the same racist excuse of, oh, the Arabs and the Muslims are so violent, we had to occupy them so they wouldn't be so anti-Semitic and hate us for no reason at all. And we took more of their land and more of their land, and you see how we're the victims? No, I don't see it. As an objective, outside person, I see that Israel's the powerful aggressor, occupier,
All right, let me jump in here. Let me jump in here.
The whole world sees it, Emily. The whole world sees it.
Let me just ask, I mean, I don't think you're going to agree on very much. Maybe you'll agree on this one. Do you think that the situation we're in is in part, and by the way, the first answer goes to Emily, in part due to failed diplomacy on the part of the West? This might be an area where you actually find some common ground. Emily, you go first.
Well, I just want to say that that was a completely intellectually dishonest representation of what's happening in the Middle East. But I'm not surprised because he doesn't actually live in the Middle East and he isn't actually dealing with what we are dealing with, both Arabs and Jews, from the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's a reason that we saw Lebanese and Syrians celebrating when Hassan Nasrallah was killed. But on to your question about failed diplomacy of the West, I do think that the West has absolutely failed. I think that the Iran deal and in general the policies of appeasement that we have seen from various governments, both in Canada, in Europe, and in the United States over the years, I'm not going to place any responsibility on one specific party or even individual because it's been multiple steps that have been taken or rather not taken. But this policy of appeasement has allowed the Islamic Republic to strengthen their terror proxies. This has been a long-standing strategy of the regime in Iran, and it's something that's continuing until today. And that is why we've seen, and by the way, I just want to add one more thing about diplomacy, which it's not exactly diplomacy, but UNIFIL, the UN agency that's responsible for keeping Hezbollah in line on that border, has failed to do so for years. And the consequence of that is that we have over 60,000 displaced Israeli families for now 11 months because there's been over 8,000 projectiles fired at us by Hezbollah. We didn't start launching anything at Hezbollah. They started launching at us. And so to place the blame squarely on Israel and say that this all is because of something that they did, or that, you know, most ridiculously, that we want a regional war, it's just patently absurd. Israel's approach from day one has been, if you want peace with us, we want peace with you too. And that's not the reality that we're seeing on the ground. And, you know, he said, oh, the Arab states would make peace with Israel if occupation. That is ridiculous. I mean, if we look at the problem here, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's not even about the Arab states. Iran is not an Arab country. And that is the problem. And the problem beyond that is them colonizing and occupying, in a way, different countries in the Arab world. That's the core of the problem.
Right.
And so, of course, the diplomacy from the West has failed to rein in the Islamic regime.
All right, Cenk, how do you respond to my question and the points raised by Emily?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, the idea that the Middle East is ecstatic about Israel protecting them from Iran, I mean, I don't know how you say it with a straight face. There's tons of people in the Middle East watching. There's not one person that's Arab or Muslim who thinks, oh, great, Israel's here to protect me. So, I mean, you live in a fantasy world. So, and Hezbollah, oh, they're attacking for no reason at all. It's because of the occupation. Is that hard to understand? No, you're just going to keep saying, no, everybody's an anti-Semite, everybody's an anti-Semite. They hate us for no reason at all. Golly gee, they just came out of nowhere and started attacking us. Okay, I got it. So now to answer your question about the American government. Look, this is very depressing, and I'm sorry that I have to be the bearer of bad news, but American government officials are totally corrupt. So we're corrupted, and I don't want people getting the wrong idea. You know, there's these tropes about, oh, the Jews control the governments or the world and stuff. That's not true. My Jewish friends have nothing to do with it. And in America, bribery is basically made legal, right? So oil companies, banks, drug companies, they all buy our politicians, and the politicians do exactly what their donors tell them. There's a group called AIPAC and related pro-Israel lobbying groups here in America. And they're bragging about how they're going to spend $100 million basically buying off our politicians here in America. And it works. They spent over $11 million on Joe Biden. Joe Biden has financed the genocide of Gaza and has given Israel a green light on every war crime they've committed. Kamala Harris is over $5 million. The Republican leaders, their top donors are AIPAC. Miriam Adelson has given $90 million to Donald Trump in this election. Her late husband, Sheldon Adelson, gave him $100 million in 2016 and 2020. So Trump and Kamala Harris are totally in the pocket of Israel. They will never, ever help the Palestinians, and all they'll do is continue 100% green light on any war crimes Israel wants.
Okay, what do we think then the US elections have in store with regards to this situation? Were there to be another Trump White House, what do we think that would change with regards to the situation we're in now? I know that's still a few months away, but Emily, let me go to you and ask you that question.
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to the U.S. elections, obviously we're going to see a harsher policy when it comes to the Islamic Republic from a Trump administration than we would expect to see from a Harris administration. I do think that both candidates are generally supportive of Israel. And I do want to clarify the point that I've made to Cenk before, but the AIPAC, the lobbying group, it's an American Israeli lobbying organization. It is not representative of the Israeli government. In fact, they have promoted policies that do not act in the interest of the Israeli government at various times. What they promote is the U.S.-Israel relationship because it's mutually beneficial. And beyond that, the aid package that goes to the state of Israel every year is not actually aid. It's not a handout. It's not checks that are going to Israeli citizens or even to the Israeli military. It's required reinvestment in American companies. It actually creates American jobs. Cenk knows this, and he is intentionally misrepresenting what AIPAC is and what they actually do, because apparently he has a problem, once again, with Jews defending themselves.
Cenk, go for it.
Okay, let me answer. So first of all, you know what the I in AIPAC stands for? Israel. Another aligned group is Democratic Majority for Israel. So yes, they're American citizens. I'll take their word for it. But they are saying, I want you to serve Israel and not America. Israel first, America maybe second or eighth, I don't really care. And again, do not put this on all Jewish Americans. It's not even true of the majority at all. The majority of
What
Jewish
you're saying
Americans
isn't
vote for
true.
Democrats. So
They don't act in the interest of the state of Israel. That's not a foreign lobbying group. You know this. You know this.
Okay, let him finish his point, Emily.
Yeah, so you know how much money America has given to Israel? $300
You mean that's been
billion.
reinvested?
Okay, look, everything makes a point.
Okay,
So
300 billion US.
themselves.
Keep going.
Hold on, let me just finish that point real quick. So the audience, you guys decide. Do you think that America gave Israel $300 billion because they thought it was so good for America and they just did it for the good of the American people, or because the American politicians got hundreds of millions of dollars from lobbying groups in favor of Israel? You guys be the judge.
Okay, I'll let you respond, and then I got another question for you, Cenk. Emily, go ahead.
I mean, I just think it's ridiculous. It's obvious that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The United States receives critical intelligence from Israel. They also receive technology and developments when it comes to especially missile defense, which was jointly developed, such as Iron Dome, jointly developed with the United States. These are tools that keep Americans safe, especially American soldiers who are overseas, whether in war or in times of relative peace. And we have seen that in action on the ground in Iraq, for example, where the U.S. Embassy and U.S. targets have been targeted repeatedly by, again, proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So yes, it is absolutely mutually beneficial for American citizens to have this aid package with Israel. Of course it is. They are allies. That is what allies do. And I love that you act as if it's so unusual or so much different than what other countries are doing, even in the United States or Europe or Canada or really any country. There are many countries, and it's within their right to advance what's in their interest. That is a logical response. We see Qatar do it. We see Iran do it. We see Israel do it. Despite that, that's not what we're seeing with AIPAC. Again, AIPAC is an American organization. They represent the U.S.-Israel relationship. That is their goal. That is what they promote. That is what they focus on. It does not represent Netanyahu. It does not represent the Israeli government. And Cenk, you know this. You just don't like Israel, which is the same thing we see from all of your material. You never answered my question, by the way, about what you think Israel should actually do in response to October 7th. How do you advocate getting hostages home? You think Hamas is really going to agree to surrender?
Let's ask him.
This
Let's
is
ask him.
unacceptable.
Let's ask him. How should Israel have responded to October the 7th?
All right, then I'm going to get to ask a question framed in my direction for her. Let's do it fair, okay?
Fair.
So my answer is super simple, and I've said it on 100 shows. Right after October 7th, I understood that they required a response, and I would have said, and I did say on air, so you could check it for yourself, that they should use special forces and be incredibly targeted towards Hamas, their leadership, and their troops, and not against the civilians. And instead, Israel decided, let's just drop 2,000-pound bombs in the middle of cities. Now, you see when they kill Hezbollah and Hamas leaders, Hezbollah and Hamas immediately say, yes, our leaders were killed. For the first 9 months, Israel didn't kill any Hamas leaders. All they were doing was slaughtering women, children, innocent men, tens of thousands of Palestinians, and didn't get a single Hamas leader. Because it wasn't about, oh, golly gee, we just happened to miss. We missed 30,000, 40,000 times. We're the most incompetent military in the world. We just keep missing by accident. No one believes you. The whole world knows you're doing it on purpose. And it's heartbreaking to watch. And so, and by the way, on AIPAC, one quick thing that she's getting wrong. AIPAC, again, this is not about Jewish or not Jewish guys. AIPAC eliminated a Jewish congressman from a legendary Jewish family in Michigan, Andy Levin, and just for the crime of saying that he's in favor of two-state solution, that Israel should be perfectly peaceful, secure, etc. He's Jewish American. He wants Israel, what's best for Israel, but he also thought the Palestinians should be free and have their own state. And AIPAC said, "How dare you!" And they eliminated him. They spent $4 million against him and got rid of him. So this is an organization that works only for Israel. The idea that America gets anything out of it is comical. If that's true, okay, why doesn't America give another really strong ally, someone that has protected them countless times and is the second largest army in their top military alliance, NATO? That's Turkey. Why don't they give Turkey $300 billion and go, oh, it's mutually beneficial?
Turkey that gives refuge to Hamas.
Hold
Turkey
on,
that threatened to invade Israel.
It's because the Turks in America.
Come on, we do. We help South Korea. We help our allies.
Okay, go ahead and pick up on some of those points. Emily, go ahead.
So I actually didn't hear a question from Cenk, although I'm happy to answer.
Yeah,
but
do you have
yes, please. So, Emily, under what degree of groveling from the Palestinians, complete surrender, no resistance, no anything, what could the Palestinians possibly do before you let them free? Or are you just going to imprison them and occupy them for the rest of time?
So first of all, the question in and of itself is disingenuous because that's not what the situation actually is. I think Israel and the majority of Israelis have been pretty clear from day one that the problem isn't a theoretical Palestinian state. The problem is that Palestinian leaders have repeatedly refused to negotiate, refused to accept peace offers, refused to accept state in certain circumstances, all the way going back to 1947 when they rejected and instead multiple Arab states decided to launch a war against the state of Israel. There could have been a Palestinian state today. I think that in the future, in the long term, it's definitely possible that there will be. But we need to see a fundamental change on the grassroots level as well, because there's been such an indoctrination of this deep-seated appreciation or revelry for violence, for terrorism, the acceptance of barbaric, inhumane acts, such as what we saw on October 7th. I mean, we saw that the polls, the initial polls the month after, a couple of months after October 7th, said 80%, roughly 80% of Palestinians, both in Gaza and the West Bank, supported the actions of October 7th. So there's a massive problem with incitement and indoctrination, and that's probably not going to change until you have a government that's serious about changing it. And what does that look like? That looks like what we saw with the Abraham Accords. It looks like changing the materials in the schools that are being taught to children, like we've seen in Saudi Arabia, like we've seen in Morocco. Talking about the cooperation that Arabs and Jews do have as people who are from this region. And I think that that's what's missing in the Palestinian equation. The day that Palestinians have a leadership that's serious about dealing with that issue, we're going to be in a very different reality. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have that. So when it comes to Israel's right to self-defense and Israel's ability to protect their own civilians, what guarantee does the state of Israel have that they're not going to be getting 15, 20, 25,000 rockets like we've seen when Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip with the aim of promoting Palestinian sovereignty? And instead, what we got in return were thousands, tens of thousands of rockets, of massacres, of murders, of kidnappings, and the list goes on and on until today. You can't deny that there's a serious problem within Palestinian society of incitement to violence and support for terrorism. That has to change.
Okay, we're coming.
I think we got a great answer there, a very clear answer. The answer is no, the occupation will be indefinite. And the requirements are that the Palestinians not only get new leadership, new government. How they're going to do that, I don't know. And that the indoctrination of everyone in Palestine has to stop. She doesn't like the polling in Palestine. So all of the Palestinians have to change all of their opinion and love their occupiers.
Yes.
And then maybe their occupiers in their infinite mercy might or might not let them have freedom.
Your opinion should change. Yes. I don't know why you think it's acceptable for someone to say that it's okay to murder and kill children, but apparently, Cenk, that's what
I didn't say that. You said that. You said that.
Is that what well, that's
she said
Palestinian. In your response.
You blithely talk about Palestinian children being murdered by Israel like it's no big deal. That collateral damage, human shields. It's disgusting how you talk about Palestinians.
All right, let's move on.
Any of those
let's
things
move on. We're about to come to the end of this discussion. I'd just like to ask you both, looking forwards, and perhaps you'll agree on this. I mean, it does look, doesn't it, and listening to you both, like we're further from any peaceful resolution to this situation in the Middle East. We're further from a two-state solution than we've ever been. I think you both agree. I can see some nodding heads. I mean, what is the way out of this? Cenk, let me ask you to start with answering that question.
Yeah, so the answer is both very easy and very difficult. The easy part is we know what the right model is. It's a peace deal. Now, people that are right-wing warmongers will say, oh, no, peace never works. And it's especially not going to work in Israel or the Middle East. Well, that's empirically incorrect. One of the most spectacular peace deals ever done was Israel and Egypt. They made a peace deal. Egypt never broke the peace deal. The same kind of racist language was used back then. The Arabs, the Muslims will never agree to peace. They're violent savages. They'll keep attacking us anyway, etc. But Egypt didn't, and they never violated the peace deal. So the answer is easy, and the occupation and a peace deal. Now, the reason why it's incredibly difficult is because Israel doesn't want that. Israel wants to take more land. And so they've taken more of the land in the West Bank. That's also, again, empirical. Now they're demanding an occupation in southern and central Gaza. They're demanding, they're going to South Lebanon right now. And so they want more land. They don't want peace. If they wanted peace, they're the powerful ones. Like the Emilys of the world keep making it seem like the Palestinians, et cetera, have power. They're the most powerless people on earth. Israel has nearly infinite power, backed by the biggest military the world has ever seen, and given endless blank checks by the American government. So if they wanted peace, they could have it immediately. All the Arab nations have already guaranteed peace. Okay. But they say, no, you can't trust savage Muslim, violent people because they're racist.
All right, we've got about a minute left. Emily, I'd like to pick up on that, and I've got one final yes-no answer question for both of you. Emily, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I don't understand how you can say accurately that Israel has a longstanding peace agreement with multiple Arab countries, including the more recent ones from the Abraham Accords, but at the same time, the problem is somehow Israel for being, as you call it, racist. So those two things cannot coexist. But beyond that, I think—
Why not let the Palestinians go?
I think from the long-term future, we need to deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran. That is the reason that you see Arabs and Jews on the same side of this issue when it comes to dealing with terror proxies across the region, whether it's Yemen, Iraq, Syria, or Lebanon, including many Palestinians whom I know personally that have a much bigger problem with the Islamic Republic of Iran and what they're doing, which is, of course, pushing away regional peace, not just with Israel, but across other countries as well, instigating many civil wars, such as what we've seen in Lebanon for decades. This is the handiwork, the byproduct of the Islamic Republic. And we need to see regime change in Iran before we're going to see a meaningful peace across this region, at least region-wide.
Okay, last question.
So let's just note for the record, I said peace, she said war.
All right, last question. Let me ask you, Cenk, first of all, yes, no. Do you see peace between Israel and the Palestinians in your lifetime?
Oh, God, I hope so. But right now, it's nearly hopeless. But look, there's one thing that they're underestimating in Israel. The right wing in America is turning. They're starting to get very angry about all the money that we're sending to Israel for. They don't really care much about Muslims, but they care that we're wasting American taxpayers on this ridiculous idea that Israel's somehow helping us by taking $300 billion from us. So be careful what you wish for. If you get, because I know Israelis right now prefer Trump to Kamala Harris, according to polling in Israel, but Trump's a loose cannon and the right wing's a loose cannon. So good luck to you.
All right, Emily, the same question to you. Yes, no, if possible.
Well, again, that's rooted in complete disinformation. As I stated, it is in the American people's interest. But beyond that, I do think it's possible in my lifetime that there will be peace, and I certainly hope so. Of course, I want nothing but safety and security for the Palestinian people. But unfortunately, when you have a leadership that is a terrorist organization, that's very, very hard to do. So hopefully we will see that change in our lifetime. But right now, it doesn't look optimistic, at least for the immediate future.
You've had the last word. Thank you very much indeed. Emily Schrader, Israeli journalist. Thank you as well to the host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. Well, that is all we have time for today's edition of Global News. Thank you for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.